Welcome to Airman Vision, where we cover all things about Air Force life. Whether you're somebody that's joining or currently in the Air Force, or you have a loved one that's joining or is currently in, we focus on trying to make content for everything that deals with Air Force life. So if you have somebody in mind that you think should be on this channel and share their information and their knowledge, be sure to comment that person down below so we can reach out and get in contact with them so we can have them on for an episode. If you're looking for even more Air Force information, be sure to check out airmanvision.com, where we have a ton of information on the website as far as blog posts go, but then we also have courses and books for purchase and merchandise. So do not hesitate. Be sure to use the links in the description below. My name is Kyle Gott. I'm a 6-year Air Force veteran, and I'm the owner of Airman Vision. And today we are guest hosting Peaches from OnesReady Podcast. This is a group of guys that are all in special operations jobs, and Peaches specifically is combat control. He's been in the Air Force for 25 years. He's a Chief Master Sergeant. And today he's going to be sharing with you some of his experience and answering some of the questions that you guys have commented on our social media posts recently. So if you're not following us on our other social media platforms, be sure to do that. So when we do these Q&As, you guys can post your questions so we can utilize them in the video. Without further ado, I'm going to let Peaches introduce himself more, and then we're going to jump right into the Q&A. All right. So, Peaches, welcome to this first episode where I'm having a guest speaker on.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. The first, huh?
Yeah.
I'll take it.
So, if there's anything that you want to introduce yourself, you're a part of OnesReady. I'm actually going to swap these so we're above the right people. All right, there we go. So, if you want to introduce yourself a little more and then explain a little bit about OnesReady and what you guys do, and then we'll jump into the Q&A that people had commented.
Yeah, absolutely. So, active duty right now, Chief Master Sergeant Jared Petrus, go by Peaches. That's how most everybody knows me. So like right off the bat, I've got to say that these are anything I say are my views and my views alone. I can't speak for the DoD or the Air Force or even special warfare. But so, yeah, came in when I was 17. I originally came in to be a PJ because I didn't know about what combat control was until I got to NDOC, which was the old pipeline. And I was there with PJs and CCT candidates, and then kind of got to learn about what CCT was, or combat control. And they offered us a chance to swap over. So I decided to swap. Ended up going through the rest of the pipeline, which was about 2.5 years. And then got to my first assignment. And this was, well, you already said I've been in for 25 years. So I guess everybody can kind of do the math, but I came in pre 9/11. I was a 99 guy. So, yeah, anyway, so finished the pipeline, went to my first unit. And then 9/11 happened. And then actually 9/11 happened while I was in the pipeline, but then went out, did all the deployments that everybody else did and all that kind of good stuff. Then spent 8 years in the United Kingdom, which was an amazing assignment.
You said 8 years?
8 years since I stayed over there for 8 years. Like, it was amazing. I loved it. And that's actually where I met Aaron, who I'm on the podcast with.
Okay.
And then kind of went back and forth on, like, these last 10 years. I think I've been at 5 different locations, Las Vegas, 2 different locations in Florida, Washington State, and then back to Vegas. So here I am. I'm on Nellis right now at the weapons school.
Nice.
And that's right. You were asking about the podcast. Forgot to plug that.
Yeah.
So OnesReady right above there, at OnesReady on Instagram, at OnesReady, or it's OnesReady channel on YouTube. And we're on all the Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and the Gram.
I should have all the links should be in the description on YouTube, at least not on Facebook, but on YouTube. They should be in the description of this video. So if you guys want an easy way to click and get straight there, you guys can go check that out as well. So we're going to jump into some of these questions that people had commented when we did some posts earlier this week, asking people what questions they had for you. So I'm going to get these pulled up. And the first one is actually going to be from me, and it is, what is combat control? Like, what do they do. So it might not be a common knowledge to most people. So
it's definitely not common knowledge, because I remember even as a senior NCO or a senior non-commissioned officer being at school with a lot of other senior non-commissioned officers, uh, somebody saw my beret, which is a scarlet beret, and it was like, all right, so I've been in the Air Force at that point. She had been in the Air Force for, I don't know, 18 years. She's like, what are you? Like, what is this? I've never seen you before. So then I had to go through and explain what it is. So you have 4 AFSCs, or Air Force Specialty Codes, within the Air Force that fall under Air Force Special Warfare. You have CCT, or Combat Control, which has a Scarlet Beret. You have Pararescue, or PJ, which have a Maroon Beret. You have Special Reconnaissance, or SR, that have a Gray Beret. And then you have TACP, or Tactical Air Control Party, which wear a Black Beret. So Combat Control is, man, there's not very many of us right now. There's right around 396-ish of us. Okay. And that ebbs and flows based off people's retirements, people graduating the pipeline, people just separating on a normal separation. And we go into austere locations, whether that's in a combat zone or even in a humanitarian, like think hurricane relief and earthquake and stuff like that. And so we will go in, whether that's jump in or drive in or fast rope from a helicopter or anything like that, and set up airfields or set up drop zones so that resupplies can get in, or so that we can land planes, get people out. Even like we can do rearming and refueling of aircraft by landing them certain places, using other aircraft to fuel those planes and rearm those planes, and then get them where they need to go. So that's one aspect of it.
So you kind CCT. Of guys, you make like MacGyver airstrips in a way.
So I mean, whether it's a dry lake bed or whether it's I-10. I mean, we landed planes. We landed A-10s in Estonia on a highway. So it's things like that, and it's not just A-10s. We'll do C-17s, C-130s, some other aircraft as well. There's a whole bunch of different capabilities that we provide, and it's a placement and access that we are able to get planes, people, equipment into areas that are otherwise kind of cut off. And then the other aspect of CCT is the Joint Terminal Attack Control, or the JTAC, where we are able to nominate targets, talk to planes, and call in airstrikes on targets.
Okay. And so that would be when you're like more on the forward front lines.
Well,
I guess if you're setting up an airstrip as well, you might be as well. But the JTACs are what people would know as like far as like the combat side of things.
Right. And the airfield stuff is in combat, especially when you start talking about distances that have to travel, or another capability that Special Tactics has, which is, Special Tactics houses all 4 of those AFSCs. There are some nuances when it comes to pararescuemen and TACP in terms of other major commands that they can belong to, but Special Tactics that falls under Special Operations Command can house, or does house, all of those. So there's other capabilities where, it is forward. Some of those airfields are forward, and we can bring in, like I said, some of these distances are too far for some helicopters to get to. So we'll set up an airfield midway through in the middle of nowhere, bring in planes, bring in the helicopters so that we can refuel them and then get them to where they need to go. We will also put special operations surgical teams there as well, so that in case any of us get hit on the target, we can get a quick helicopter ride from the target back to there so that they can do surgery and operations.
So you definitely have to have some nerves of steel to do
that's
CCT.
What the pipeline does for us. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not for the faint of heart.
No, and it's a pretty high attrition rate right now. It's sitting at around 89% in terms of attrition rate. Like,
so only 11% make it that go through.
Yeah.
Man,
Like my class, I think we
yeah,
started with 120, 140, and then it ended with me and another dude.
dang. I
So
bet
that's more than 11, or that's
I'm sure
more
you
than
guys
less
get
than
pretty
11%.
close when you go through all that together, though, because as you see other guys dropping out, it's you're all just trying to make it through together. So
Yeah,
I'm
and
sure it
that's
creates
actually,
some different bonds than other jobs in the military. Like the military in general has a bond, but your guys' jobs in special operations creates like a whole nother layer to that bond.
yeah, and it's not tangible. You can't put your finger on it. You can't describe it, but you know it when you see it. You know it when you feel it. And I think and you even mentioned, I don't know if you've been around some soft teams or special operation force teams, but they just they interact different than everybody
Mm-hmm.
else. That's why we a lot of times we think that we're sneaky and that people can't tell who we are in the airport or something like that. And it's like, yeah, I know exactly who you are. So it's just yeah, we interact a lot differently than other folks.
Cool. So that should be a pretty good answer on what CCT is. So the next question, we're going to jump into questions that other people had asked
Mhm.
on our posts earlier this week. And so the first one is going to be, what is training like to become part of special operations? Could you talk about some of your experiences and the demands of the training? So you had just mentioned how high the attrition rate was. You started with 120 some, and you and another guy were left at the end. So could you kind of go deeper into that? Like, how long is it? What stages do they have possibly, and just overall encompass what that's like to go through the training for that?
Sure. So special operations covers a bunch of different pipelines, if you will, right? The SEALs have buds, Green
Mm-hmm.
Berets have the Q course, and some other courses thrown in there. They're SFAS. So we have a bunch of different. We call it the pipeline just because it's the entire thing, which usually takes around 2.5 years, depending on injuries and school dates, school start and end dates. But so you go into basic training. Well, taking a step back, brand new recruits get a chance to work with developers. So they go to MEPS, they get their initial physical and everything, get blessed off, and then they're able to go to development. That's usually 6 to 9 months. So there, you can't just hop right in, come in on a Friday to the recruiter and then leave Monday morning. You're not shipping out. That's not the way it works. So you're going to be 6 to 9 months with the developer on average. It could be a little less. And then you're going to go to an Air Force or AFSW, Air Force Special Warfare basic training flight. Like they have their own flight that usually
Okay.
allows a little bit more time to eat, sleep, a little bit more physical training time, PT time. Then you're going to go to SWIC, Special Warfare Candidate Course, which is like an 8-week prep that they're going to help build you up for anything that you did lose during basic training. They're going to help build you back up and then also teach you some of the skills that are going to be required for the next phase, which is assessment and selection, or ANS. So that is where the no kidding, like we lose people in SWIC or the Special Warfare Candidate Course, but we lose a lot of people in SWIC or in ANS. So
Is SWIC
ANS
more
is
to just physically prepare people for selection, assessment and selection?
it is a training aspect, and it used to be called prep because it's made to prepare you. But a lot of people quit there too, just because like it is, we do a lot of pool work, a lot. So there's a lot of drowning, in my words,
Yeah.
drowning that goes on. Um, like I passed out a couple times as well. So we do lose a lot of people. A lot of people are like, you know what? I know that this is going to get harder. So this is just, it's not for me. So they'll just bail right then and there. Then we lose people during assessment and selection. Assessment and selection is also where they get a chance to kind of pick their job. So we have coming in, it's a special warfare open enlistment. And essentially they get a choice of all four of the AFSCs. And then once they get through ANS, if they're going to get selected, they say, all right, I want to be a CCT, PJ, SR, TACP. And then they generally get what they want. The only time
This
they
is a
don't.
new program that they started doing the last few years, wasn't it? Because before you used to get slotted for a specific job and then go to basic training and then go straight into like assessment and selection.
That's
But
right.
then I think they were realizing, oh, we can probably prep these people a little bit better and get more people to pass rather than washing out as many people. Have they seen an improvement in numbers since they've switched to this new model?
Improvement in numbers, yes, but the attrition rate is the exact same.
Okay.
So we're getting more people in, which is
Okay.
great. So we're getting a larger graduating class, but the attrition rate's still the same. But instead, like the idea is instead of jump into the pool or jump into this program and you just need to survive, and you know your central nervous system spiked, your adrenal system is spiked, and it just like it's crazy. Which there's value to that. Don't get me wrong, there's value to that. But now it is okay. We're going to slowly build a nice foundation for you, and slowly ramp it up, and to where they're going to end exactly where I ended. But at least they should be better prepared for it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So up to this point, you haven't even technically officially became CCT or a PJ or anything, because you're talking 8-9 months after you swear in of training to prep to even get accepted to go to basic training. Then you have 8 weeks of basic training. Then you have 8 weeks of SWICS. And then you have, how many weeks is the assessment and selection?
I'll just say it's 4.
4 weeks.
One is it changes, and 2 they try and keep it a bit of a mystery.
Okay. And so, and then it can also depend too, because if people are struggling, can't they get held back or washed back and then have to go through the program again? So I personally knew somebody that was in SEER and was in for like a year of training, and he failed at a portion, and they were like, you can start everything from day one, or you can get reclassed. He ended up choosing to get reclassed, but they were like, they don't offer people that far into the program to start over from day one if they don't think you can actually make it all the way back. And he was like mad about it after the fact, because he was just like, oh, I can't do it. But they were like, they believed in you, but it's like, that's how demanding it can be. Like it can feel after, like literally after everything we just said, you went through all these stages and you finally get to a spot. And if you get washed back, it could feel like an eternity, because you're like, oh, I was almost there. And then, yeah, I can't imagine like the mental, like, gymnastics that you have to go through just to keep pushing yourself every day through all of that training.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten to pre-dive. So if you get selected at ANS, that you didn't go to pre-dive, and then after pre-dive, which is 5 or 6 weeks, something like that, then you go to dive school, which again is still running 6-minute or less miles. Oftentimes, just getting drowned in the pool, doing 50-meter underwaters, and doing, doing stuff with tanks and getting knots tied in the air hose to where you've got to take the tanks off and you got to unfoul. And this is, you've got a blacked out mask and all that kind of stuff. So, it's not easy. Which is the point, because if it were easy,
sounds like they're trying to spark panic. Like,
well, so that in a way they're trying to stress inoculate you, is what they're trying to do. Because if the first time I ever got tested mentally, I panicked and it happened to be underwater, more than likely I'm going to die. And the team that I'm with, I'm endangering them. So I need to be able to handle stress at different levels and be able to still react and operate in somewhat of a calm fashion and be able to problem solve and work through that, whatever the issue is that's going on.
Dang. So after dive school, then where do you go in training?
You're going to the Army's Airborne School, which is 3 weeks. You'll go to survival school, which is another 3 weeks, I believe. And then that's where things kind of go different ways. So for combat controllers, we will go to air traffic control school because, we're I don't want to say we're the same. We are not the same as the folks that are in the tower, but we learn those same kind of FAA skills. PJs will do medical stuff. So it's those kind of that's where we split off, and then we'll go to those schools, and then we'll hit combat control school. PJs will hit pararescue school. Special reconnaissance goes to special reconnaissance, which is integrated into combat control school. Then we all graduate with our berets.
Dang. So that's well over a year from when you initially even went to MEPS and signed up.
Right.
Well over a year. And you're physically training and mentally training that entire time.
Yep.
There's not many breaks in between when you finally go to MEPS and you start your preparation to physically prepare just to get the basic training and get a job slot. But then that's when your physical training really ramps up after BMT. It sounds like it's just like pedal to the floor.
It is
until you make it through.
There are breaks. Obviously, you're going to have, I say obviously you're going to have Christmas off and that kind of stuff. But because it's not like the instructors want to be there either. But there are times where, because there's different phases during tech school that you're allowed to, sometimes you're allowed to leave base, sometimes you're not, sometimes you're allowed to wear civilian clothes, sometimes you're not. So if you get in trouble or you're sneaking, down to the Riverwalk in San Antonio when you're not supposed to be, and a cadre member sees you, which they are always they're everywhere. The cadre are everywhere, and inevitably somebody sees you, and you better believe you're getting an early morning, Saturday or Sunday morning, for some extra training. So, but yeah. And so after
sounds exhausting.
It is. It's tiring. You eat a lot because you got to maintain your, your calorie intake. But so once you get your beret, then if you're a CCT or if you are a combat controller, special reconnaissance, or a SOCOM assigned pararescueman, most of the time you will end up going to another course, which is called Advanced Skills Training, back at Hurlburt Field. And then you're going to get another, 8 months of training. Now that is not necessarily a selection. That is not, it's tough, but it is where we take the basic level skills that you have learned and we just increase them by doing full mission profiles and live shooting and all that kind of stuff.
And those are the people that have already proved physically and mentally that they're able to push through, that they can handle it. And so now you guys are giving them more responsibility on that. They've already made it, right? And now
we're putting forth.
We're going to really double down on your training.
Yeah, we're putting forth more resources and money and more effort to make sure that you are trained at a level so that when you do graduate that course, kid could go out the door and deploy, and we're not worried about you.
That's awesome. So this actually ties into the next question. So this question that we just answered was from Tess Libby on YouTube. But then we have Javon Singleton that said, what was the hardest part about assessment and selection? So you had mentioned a little bit about, the rigorous training options that you have to go through. But what was the hardest thing specifically for you? Because I'm sure there's different aspects that other people struggle with.
Yep.
But you personally, Peaches, what was the hardest part for you?
Yeah, you nailed it. Like different people struggle with it. Like I went through Indoc with some polo players that the water was just like, yeah, whatever. They were, collegiate swimmers, and they're like, yeah.
People
okay,
say like
whatever.
high school swimmers, even like some who still struggle. Even in that, but sometimes people that are used to the water, to them, they're like, oh, no big deal. But they'll struggle with something else that like everybody else is like, oh, this is the easy part.
That's exactly right. So I was relatively comfortable in the water. What I didn't like in the water, though, were something called 10-ups. I hated 10-ups. And part of it, like for all of our viewers on OnesReady, they all know that I'm pretty short. Like I am a short dude. And it's pretty funny to see me in pictures next to some of average human beings. because I am that short.
They say like a lot of people think you have to be like massive and jacked, but I actually went to basic training with a guy that became a pararescueman, and he went through everything, and he was like 5'6", weighed like 150 pounds,
Skinny.
and yeah, and like, but he could do everything, and he like mentally pushed through it, and he did 10 years, and he just recently got out because of injuries, but now he's training people to join.
Yeah.
And so, but like you think it's got to be all these like, super big athletes, like, because it's like, oh, it's special operations, but then you'd be surprised some of the guys like that I've even met that you're like, oh, that's awesome. Like,
yeah. So it is we always say it's a 80% mental, 20% physical, because it is such a mental game to be willing to go underwater, stay underwater, and even when you're hurting at the most, you don't pop, you don't pop the water. To be super cold, hungry, seeing folks that you look up to, or just like you said, you think the jack dudes are going to make it, and a lot of time they are some of the first ones to quit, and you're like, so you start comparing beforehand. You're like, well, if he's quitting, man, I've got no chance. And it's not the case. It's 80% mental, 20% physical. Most of the skinnier kind of folks do make it. Me, I'm a short dude that's short and stocky, so I can lift a lot of weight, but I can't run very fast. And which also means that in the pool, where it would take somebody like Aaron, 3.5 strokes to get across the pool, it takes me, no kidding around, 12 to get across the pool underwater. So I'm using a lot more oxygen. It's just taking me a lot longer. So doing 10 ups, which is where you're on the width of the pool on each side, you have a group on each side, and you're in the push-up position with your hands on the gunnel on the edge of the pool, and you're doing push-ups. And then once you get to either a certain number or they tell you go, you sling yourself into the pool and you go subsurface to the other side, and then you can pop up, get back on there, and you start doing push-ups. That right there, it wasn't the push-ups that were hard.
Push-ups is hard enough. Then they have to swim after doing push-ups. I can't even imagine.
That was by far the worst for me. But
how many times would you do that back and forth? Till they said to stop.
Till it was over.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine. Like, I feel like I would do like one of those and be like, please no more. And they'd be like 3 more later. You'd be like, okay, I'm done. Because especially like swimming, I know like it's really tough on your shoulders and your chest. Well, like your whole body, swimming's a whole body workout. But like your shoulders and your chest get a good workout from swimming. So I can't imagine doing push-ups and then having that like tightness already in your chest, and then having to, and like swimming too creates cramps a lot of times. Then I'm like, oh, that just sounds, it sounds like a lot of not fun things.
Yeah. It's, for as much of it is a selection, and it sucked, right? And you're getting mentally and physically tested every day. Some of the best times were in there because you're sharing a mutual suck fest with other people that mean a lot to you, and you're all going through it together. So it can make for some really good times.
Something that a lot of people will say is like BMT is like the most fun that you never want to have again. And I'm like, I feel like you guys just get that experience multiple times because of all your training, where you're like, oh, it's like the most fun I've ever had that I never want to have again. Because like you said, you're like, oh, it's like some of those worst times, you're going through these really sucky times. But at the end of the day, you're like, those were some good memories. But it's like in the moment, it probably didn't feel like this is a good memory. It was very grueling and tough. But then after, it's one of those things where you look back on and you're like, oh, I'm glad I got through that. I'm glad.
It's always great when it's over.
Yeah. I was like, well, it's something to be super proud of too. So I'm sure you can look back and you're like, man, like that's still like, even though you went through that, it's still like, that's grueling. Instead of look back, you're like, yeah, I did that and I made it through it.
Yeah.
So that's an awesome thing. So yeah, it sounds like it wasn't just the water aspect. It was they're physically trying to make you tired and then have you get in the water. is
Yeah.
what makes it even more difficult.
Well, and get you out of breath and all that kind of stuff. And they know it sucks. So that's why
Yeah.
they're going to do it.
And you
And
can't I'm sure you can't sit there and be like, oh, I'm just going to take this really easy.
no,
Because they're all watching you. There's not many of you guys, or they have lots of eyes on you. So if they see somebody trying to take it easy, it's kind of like the gas chamber. I don't know if they still do that at basic training, but they made everybody take your mask off, and then you had to say the Airman's Creed, and you have to take a breath. You can't do that long-winded thing and not
no.
breathe in. So it's they make sure that you're not taking it easy.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure they do it at basic still, but I mean, we do it to each other in the pipeline. You just these massive cans, and all of a sudden you hear a pin getting pulled and the spoon go flicking, and then you're like, oh no, here it comes.
Oh man,
So
that's awesome. So this next question kind of ties into the hardest things that you've done. This is from Ashley Young on YouTube, and she had said, did you go through any moments where you regretted joining the Air Force? I was going to kind of add to that question and say, did you ever have any moments where you were on the edge of quitting or giving up?
as in separating kind of thing and saying I'm done with the Air Force, or quitting.
Yeah. So because this doesn't specify if it was during training or in your whole 25 years, I guess it can incorporate any segment of your career up to this point. Have you ever felt like that?
So I originally came in on a 6-year enlistment, and I always told myself I will continue to do it as long as I'm having fun. And I figured, okay, I'll at least do 10 years just because I'm not too old at that point. I've dedicated a lot, but not too much to, regret or anything like that. So I got to 6 years, still having fun, still loving life. Got to 10 years, same thing. And that's kind of how I've been doing it. Now, at a certain point, I was definitely like, okay, well, I'm going to do 20,
Yeah.
for the retirement. But again, I still was like, am I having fun? Oh, I am. Okay, cool. Well, I'll continue it. So that's kind of what I went with. I can't think of any point in time where I was like, dude, I should probably get out or even retire. Now I say that fully knowing that it's coming up soon, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at 25, I mean, it's
you've
coming up
more
soon.
than enough did the time for retirement. So now it's just a matter of whenever you want to say, okay, it's now.
Yeah. So but no, I've never regretted, never thought about dude, screw this. I'm out. The Air Force has given so much to me.
Yeah.
And this is having done 6 years, it's the people you meet, the experiences you get to have, the places you get to travel, and you can't, the skills that the Air Force has helped provide, mash all of that up, and it's just an amazing experience. Now, everybody's experience is not the same. There are obviously some negatives that people have had out there. So it's not like I'm just saying everything's perfect. And I'm not saying that there haven't been times where I'm like, dude, this sucks. Or maybe not this sucks, but I'm having a disagreement with a
season
supervisor.
or a rough patch.
Yeah. So that's not to say that didn't happen. It hasn't been all roses the entire time, but you also know that it's not permanent either. Sometimes it's temporary, or you just got to wait somebody out because they happen to be your supervisor or your senior enlisted or your commander or something like that. And you're like, man, I just got to wait this person out, or maybe I can't wait this person out. I just try and initiate a move or something like that.
So actually, I'll touch on it because I only did 6 years and I ended up getting out. But one of the coolest things that I got told, I got paperwork at my 3-year mark. I got an LOR, and it was given to me from a senior master sergeant. And after he gave me my paperwork, he was like, "Hey, sit down." And he's like, "What's going on?" And this was the first time I'd ever had a senior NCO really sit down and just casually talk to me, to be like, "Hey, let's just shoot the breeze." And I was just like, "Oh." So I explained stuff. And I was just like, yeah, I'm just frustrated with this and that, it's I'm discouraged. And he was like, I agree with a lot of those things. And I was like, oh my gosh, it blew my mind. That was the first time I'd had upper supervision really like agree with me, like, oh, not everything is amazing, you know? And so then he said he had done, I think at that point he was at 19 or 20 years. And he was like, you have to, he's like, everybody's going to be different. You have to look at the Air Force has pros and cons, but for everybody, that list is going to be different. Some people, their list might have more cons than pros. Other people, it's going to be opposite. They're going to have way more pros than cons. And he said, for me, there are very few cons. He's like, there are cons to the Air Force. Not everything's amazing, but there are a lot more pros for me personally. And he's like, that's why I've chosen to stay in. And he said, for you, you might have to sit down and assess that and go, you know what, the cons outweigh the pros. So I'm going to choose to get out. It's not to say that the Air Force was a mistake or regretted joining, because I still don't even regret joining. But it was one of those things where I'm glad I did it. But for me, it wasn't something that I wanted to do longer than 6 years because I just had more cons than pros. But he had explained to me, like, while you're in, you don't have to like all the rules, but we get paid to follow them. And like, that was what really blew, like for my next 3 years that I was in till I got out, like that changed the way I thought about everything. Cause I was like, oh, I can show up and be like, I don't like this. I will do this for you. And I will do it the best I can, but I don't like it. Right. And like, then nobody had a problem with me because like, I was going to do it before anyways, but like, before I would just like, I wouldn't really like handle it in the best way, I guess. Like if I got frustrated or discouraged about stuff. And then after that, I was like, oh, well, I signed a contract. I get paid to do this. So just show up and do what I get paid to do. I don't have to like it, but I mean, I do like getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. So it's like, you know, and it was just a really cool thing to get. So like when you said, you know, not everybody's experience is the same. Me and this senior master sergeant were both the same career field. But for him, he absolutely loved maintenance. And so like a lot of the pros stemmed off of that. For me, I didn't really care for maintenance. It wasn't what I was passionate about. It wasn't what I wanted to do. Am I thankful that I learned a lot of maintenance stuff? Yeah, because I didn't know how to do a lot of that stuff before I joined. But I'm like, it's not what I'm passionate about. So like for him, he had this huge like list of pros, you know, and like we had the same career field, but he was just like, that's totally cool if you want to get out. He's like, there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's not. You served. You served just like everybody else did.
Got that.
And a lot of people don't know that just because you pick a job and you get trained in that job, say you do it for a couple of years, you can do a different job in the Air Force. Like you can, if you came in as a maintainer, you can try and be an Air Force Special Warfare. You can go from being, I don't know, security forces to go, you know, do CE or Red Horse or SEER or whatever. Like you can, especially critically manned career fields, is you can leave dental and then go to
I believe they just updated recently the policy on that too. I'm not 100% certain, but like, because before when I was in, it was like, oh, we were critically manned. So they were like, nope, you can't cross train out. Because that was something I was looking into, but they were like, nope, like it's not happening for my career field. But recently, didn't they change it to like all critically manned career fields can transfer to another critically manned? Or if you're in like a fully manned career field, you can go to any other career field that's like critically manned.
There's some nuances to that. And there's some little like gotchas in there. But yeah, for the most part, that is correct.
It sounds like they made it a little bit easier than it used to be. Because before, a lot of the guys in maintenance, because I even knew a bunch of guys that were in, I was aircraft structural maintenance. And then there were guys that were in metals technology. We kind of share the same shop. And I knew a guy that was in the process of cross training. Like he had already been accepted for boom operator, all this stuff. Then they canceled his orders because the career field was like put on a freeze for being critically manned. So they like nixed his package to cross train. And he was like, oh my gosh. Like he was like so excited because he had finally got accepted. He had gone through some stuff like, but he hadn't got like his official, like you're going to tech school yet. Yeah. And then they were like, nope, program's done. And so I was like, that was tough. So it seems like they're trying to get away from that because I don't know if that kid stayed in or not because he PCS'd after that, but like they could have possibly kept him in the Air Force, but he might have gotten out now because he wasn't able to cross train. And so I think maybe they're realizing, oh, maybe we should let some people move around a little bit just
Yep.
because, or at least not make it as difficult. Obviously, the Air Force needs come first, right? And so the Air Force isn't just going to let anybody be like, I want to move jobs tomorrow. There's
Yeah,
a
it
lot
is
of
a process.
processes involved there.
And
So,
especially
but
coming
it seems
into
like they're
what
being
we do,
smarter.
like there's what's called the initial fitness test that folks have to take, and it's just the entry, it's the pay to play to come in, and you've got to do all that kind of stuff. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a process.
And that's what I try to tell a lot of people too. This is kind of like off subject a little bit, but with job selections, like you can't just like go to a company with zero experience, zero education, zero experience, and say, I want to be an engineer. Right? They're going to be like, nah, like we
I
have
want to
we have
go to
other people that are
school.
more qualified. And so like that's kind of how the Air Force is, but the Air Force is literally like being like, we'll take people that have zero qualifications. But the stipulation to that is Air Force needs are going to come first, right? Like
Hmm.
we're going to train you, we're going to give you a skill, we're going to give you the education, we're going to give you the job training. And so that's something where, like you said, like it's an obligation you're signing up for. And like one of those things has to be like one of the biggest reasons people join is to serve their country, right? So they're going to serve the United States. That typically needs to come first and foremost, even above like, I want this specific job and this job only. But it's like, how much experience do you have with that job? Like you want that job, but are you actually like a top tier candidate for that, right? Or do you just want it? And most of the time, it's a lot of people that are younger with no experience. They just, here's the job list, here's what I want.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely difficult in that aspect. And so I'm glad to hear that the Air Force is trying to make it a little bit easier to change once you're in, because that's best case scenario for people that decide, I like the Air Force, I just don't like what I'm doing in the Air Force. Like you want to keep those people in because they're still proud of serving. They feel like they'd be a better fit somewhere else. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that the Air Force is trying to change things a little bit to make it easier to try to keep some of those people in that would instead possibly get out if they can't
Yep.
change jobs.
Hmm.
So this next question comes to us from the Italian Job and says, let me pull it up real quick. Says, at what point in your career did you fully leave the theater/missions, if applicable, and become full-time decision making? Was it a sudden change, or did you develop as you promoted to become less of one and more of the other? So, like you were saying, you were out going and setting up airstrips, and it's like, do you still do that? Or now, because you've been in so long, 25 years, and you're senior leader, are you more, you're making decisions and other people are going and doing that work, or are you still
Yeah.
involved on the ground like aspect of that?
Unfortunately, I'm not out on the ground anymore. I would love to be. I would love
Yeah.
to continue to do the mission stuff. It doesn't mean that I still don't go out and with some of the folks and do some of those training events and stuff like that. But like if I am the one that's going out and doing those things in real world, like we are hurting really, really bad. Something has gone terribly wrong. But it's, again, I miss it. So we are a predominantly enlisted force, meaning our enlisted are the ones that are the tacticians that are out there doing stuff. Our officers, although they do deploy, they are not the tactical experts like our enlisted are, which means that we, as enlisted members, we get a lot more time on the team doing the job. So most of us will do it for about 15 years. Not, on the team, it's not an age thing, it's a rank thing, and you will kind of promote yourself out of
Mm-hmm.
doing the job. So you can kind of control your destiny with that in terms of, okay,
Of
well,
how
you're
ambitious you
promote
are with promoting.
right, right.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you can't go take a break. In by a break, I mean, um, we have to have folks that go and do our switch trait. When I brought up cadre, those are active duty members that are at the schoolhouses actively training folks, and those jobs are extremely important, because if we don't feed the machine to make more CCT, PJSR, TACP, then we're just going to kind of age out and die on the vine. So we need folks younger, older, more experienced, less experienced to go be instructors. So a lot of times, by the time somebody's on their, fourth deployment, they're like, okay, I need a little bit of break, or maybe I need shoulder surgery or something like that, and I'm having a hard time getting it at the operational unit because we hardly ever turn down deployments. You give us a chance to deploy, we're like, okay, let's go. So the way to force that and enable, me to get healthier, then okay, maybe let me go be an instructor. I get more downtime. Maybe I want to knock out some college. I want to get healthy again. And then I do that for 3 to 4 years. And then I go right back onto the team and continue to operate and stuff like that.
So at what point, you said because it's more of a promotion thing, so at what point typically does that look like for you guys, where you guys are phasing out of the being like forward deployed to being more of the decision makers or like training?
In terms of decision makers, you're looking at E8 or a senior master sergeant and above.
Okay.
Yeah, our master sergeants or E7s are jobbing it still. And we're a younger force than, say, the Navy or the Army. Like, you will have E9s or sergeant majors out there still running a team. And part of it is because the Army promotes quicker than we do. I mean, they do. It's we just, in the Air Force, we promote differently. So it takes us longer, but we are typically rank-wise a younger force than the Army and Navy.
So it sounds like, actually, compared to like other jobs, like I was maintenance, and if you're an E7 on the flight line doing a job, that is not normal. So even in like other career fields, typically once you hit tech sergeant, so you hit E6, that's typically when you're like phased away from doing a lot of like the forward work that we do, and you're more like running a shift. So you're in charge of that whole shift. So you guys actually, you seem like you're doing the actual work longer than some other career fields, possibly in the Air Force. So, which is kind of crazy to think about because your job is so physically and mentally demanding, but you guys are in that aspect for a decent amount of time, like 10 to 15 years versus even in like a normal career field, you might be just in that career field for 6 or 8 years. And then you eventually are like, oh, I'm hands off now. I'm in charge of people, not necessarily in charge of doing the jobs.
There's a couple different things with that, right? Like, it's a mentality. I said, we want to continue to deploy. We want to be relevant. We want to continue to provide value to a team or to a mission. So that's why we continue to get after it. We're obviously, because of the pipeline and our mentality, we also want to be prepared for everything. So being physically fit and healthy is important to us. Like, a lot of times we will schedule training around the ability to work out and make sure that we get 2 hours a day. Most are not day to day, but usually on a normal day at home station, when you have training, you show up at 7 o'clock, and from 7 to 9, that is dedicated workout time. Like, don't expect anything done before 9 because we are in the gym getting after it. Starting 9 o'clock, that's when we'll go to the range, go shooting, or we'll get ready for a jump, or, we'll go ride dirt bikes or whatever we're going to do. So like, physical fitness and preparedness is important to us. So that's why we are able to maintain that for so long. The other aspect of it is we have what's called Preservation of the Family and the Force, which is a SOCOM program funded by Congress that puts sports therapists, strength and conditioning coaches, chaplains, medical providers, and operational psychologists as a team embedded in each squadron. So I have an expert that is, kind of monitoring, providing fitness plans and strength plans for me and for each person. If I happen to get hurt, I mean, it's generally in the same building. I can just walk over to the sports therapist and go, hey, I tweaked this, something like that. And they'll, dry needle, or they'll do some work on us, and in an attempt to keep us always ready to go. So it's a phenomenal program. I mean, it's spoiled. Like, fully acknowledge it's spoiled.
It sounds like you guys are treated like a pro sports team where you guys have your own like staff that's there to make sure that you guys are still performing at peak performance levels.
Yeah, I mean, it's not at the level of the Raiders or the Golden Knights, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's phenomenal professionals, and those same folks could easily go work for an NCAA team or a pro team. In fact, we had somebody who worked for the Oregon Ducks, and it was weird because I was like, dude, how do you go from working the Oregon Ducks and now you're with us, degenerates? And he was like, look, man, you guys and your mentality, I have to, on a college team, I used to have to beg and struggle to get these athletes in here to train because they were just relying on their given talent and skills and stuff like that. And it was a lot of work to get them to come in. You guys get shot or get hurt, and I can't keep you out of the gym. I have to keep telling you to slow down because you're just going to hurt yourself even more. So it's a mentality thing. Yeah. But
no, that's cool. I see, like, I didn't even know that. And I was at Nellis for 3 years. And so I'm like, you guys train on the same base and have these same opportunities because we have EOD unit there. There's pararescue there. There's CCT. Like, you guys have like the weapons school that you guys train with too. And so there's like so much stuff like that is integrated with special operations at Nellis. And I was there and like, I didn't even know that you guys have like your own staff. Like, I thought you guys just had to go to the hospital like everybody else, but I mean, like, you still do for some things.
Yeah, for some things, yeah.
But you guys actually have, like a physical therapist that's like there, like while you're training in your building, phenomenal. Where you could be like, hey, I'm gonna go over here and I got a cramp or something, right? Like, let's work this out, And I'm like, dang, that's actually like really cool because you guys do have such an important job and you guys train so much harder than like physically so much harder than all the other jobs. Like, a lot of other jobs, we just go in and sit at a desk half the day or we go out and do stuff. But like your job is literally based on like your physical capabilities. And so like for them to have a whole team. So like, even like you said, they have like a psychologist with you guys too. And I'm like, that like to me is incredible, especially with like the mental health aspect of like just being in the military in general. There's a lot of mental demand. So I can't even imagine the special operations side. But that's huge. Like to even just have that in-house where you're like, because sometimes with mental health, even I went through mental health stuff when I was in, and even trying to get appointments set up and all that, like it was, some of the stuff was a nightmare. And you're like, I'm already having a bad time and this is not making it easier, And so I'm like, for them to provide that, I'm like, I just think that's really cool. Like, I'm like, man, I wish multiple units would do that even for normal jobs. And they kind of do here or there because they do have I can't remember the name.
Well, the Air Force has True North.
There's like people that would show up for like psychologists, like family something.
The MFLAC, the Military Family Liaison.
Yes.
Liaison counselor, I think is what it stands for.
So
and they're a phenomenal resource.
And they had started that like I think it was like right around like the middle of my enlistment. It was like started being more like prevalent and they were promoting it more. And so like anything that they can do to try to make things easier, because there's so like you said, there's so much training that needs to happen, and you guys are like, I can't be injured, I gotta keep training, right? Like it is a mentality thing where like a lot of people want to push through it. And so when it's difficult to go and schedule a physical therapy appointment or a mental health appointment, right? Like you guys especially are not going out of your way to do that. Like they're going to have to bring those people to you. But it's the same way in a lot of other career fields in the Air Force. So I'm like, that's, to me, I'm like, just hearing that is like, it kind of made me like smile. Cause I was just
that's good. It's a phenomenal awesome program.
Like, knowing about that, where I'm like, that is extremely smart. And so it's like, it's good to hear that you guys are actually like provided those opportunities so you guys can focus on your training. So this next question that we have is coming from YouTube. It was Priscilla Parker said, should I actually go into the Air Force or combat control, even if no other jobs interest me? I'm taking this as, what if I don't pass? What if I go in as well, I guess you can't even go in specifically as combat control anymore.
Right. It's open
special operations. So, but I took this kind of as, what if I go into special operations and then I wash out? And so it's like, should I even do that if there's the chance of me not actually ending up in that job? Or like, I think this goes into the mental thought process of
Yeah.
this. So it's like, what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, when we get this question, of like, should I? And we always answer with like, I don't know, should you? Because I don't like it's a not that Priscilla Parker is trying to trap me or anything like that, but it's kind of a loaded question the way that like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know her background, I don't know her physical fitness level, I don't know a lot of things about her particular situation. So but we get that question a lot, should I or can I make it? Another one is like, hey, I'm a little older, I was 17 when I came in. Some people are in their, 30s, 35, and they're like, I don't know, do you think I'm too old? And we're like, I don't know. Are you? Because
Do you
you
think you're
gotta
too
you
old?
gotta go try and find out. And if you never try, then you'll never know.
Yeah.
If you do come in though and don't make it or get hurt or don't get selected, as long as you have a good what's called a 125 alpha, which is kind of like a training report, um, as long as there were no issues with integrity or anything like that, you
As
will
long as
be
you weren't a
allowed to come
problem
back.
child.
Right. Yeah. As long as you're not, DUI or anything like that, as long as you weren't caught lying and stuff like that, or there wasn't some kind of psychological red flag that somebody saw, you will be invited to come back. You'll go do a different job, depending on how hurt you are. Say it's an injury, right? If it's a small injury and we can get you healthy here in a couple of weeks or maybe a month or two, then okay, you'll stay on staff. You'll see their medical providers and get strength and conditioning and stuff like that, and then get to retry. If it's a 6 month recovery, or they're like, hey, you need to just mature a little bit. We want you to come back, but we want you to mature a little bit. Then you'll get reclassed into a different job. And maybe it's still kind of aligned, like it could be SEER or special missions aviation or something like that. That's still kind of combat oriented,
Mm-hmm.
or something else. That's where you do kind of fall into the needs of the Air Force.
Yeah.
But, um, you know, I don't know.
That's
Can you
that's the
make it?
tough thing is like it's people, it's like, but realistically at the end of the day, like our military needs what it needs. And so like that comes first and foremost because like, as much as it would be awesome to have 50% of our force be working in the hospital, that's not maintainable as a
No,
military. So you get so many people that are like, oh, I want this job. And it's like, that's a really small career field. And you're one of like 3,000 people that want that job this year. But like the career field's not even 3,000 people big, And
no.
so there's, that's definitely a tough thing where like, I know with the washing out of like or getting reclassed can be tough because people are like they're dead set on I want to be this, and then they get reclassed into just like a normal job, and they're like, this isn't what I wanted to do in the Air Force. But like you said, like if it's on a good term, like if you're leaving on good terms, or if you're leaving on like an injury that is recoverable, but that you just need time, you might have that opportunity to progress yourself to a point where you're like, I know what to expect now. I'm going to go
Mhm.
round two, eventually, maybe a year, 2, 3 years later, and be like, I know what to expect. I'm mentally better prepared. So I think at the end of the day, it's maybe not even the worst case scenario to get possibly reclassed. And I don't know how retraining works to go back into special operations. It's a little different than normal cross training.
Right. You still have to apply and all that kind of stuff. But say I'm a maintainer, and I'm just going to use that because you were, but I would apply for retraining through what used to be my PERS. Well, maybe it is my PERS. I'm confusing the old system with the
Mhm.
new one. But you go back in and you apply for retraining, but then you also need to make sure that you have your class 3 flight physical already done, and there's no issues with vision or scoliosis or anything like that. But then also you've got to have a solid initial fitness test, which is the entry level PT test for us, which has to be administered by somebody who is in the special warfare approved to administer that test. And that's running, swimming, calisthenics, pull-ups, push, it's all the stuff that we do. And you got to have good enough scores. And then it goes up to the Air Education Training Command functional manager, and then they approve you to retrain or not.
Cool. So I think this last question, and then we actually got a question on the live stream too that I'm going to have you answer as well.
Cool.
We have two more questions. So this was from Wraithage, said, how difficult is it for females to make the cut in special operations?
I mean, we have them in special operations. So that again, like, how difficult is it? I mean, it's the same. The standards are the exact same, right?
It's subjective.
Right. So again, kind of like Priscilla's, I think it was the last one.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know your fitness level. I don't know anything like that. But I know that the standard is standard, whether you're male or female, and you're going to be expected to meet that standard. Now, things that get most people are the pool. That's just kind of the great equalizer for folks, because man, it's rough, but I don't know. Like I said, we have females and males that do phenomenal, and then we have some that, not some, we have more than some that just don't make it. That was kind of one of those realization things. Like we do live events on Discord and on Instagram and stuff like that, and we talking with folks, and we were talking with some shippers that were about to ship out. I was like, hey, like, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but most of you guys that we're talking to right now, just so you know, aren't going to make it. And it was just kind of like, oh, I was like, and again, I'm not passing judgment on any of you. Maybe you'll have a higher percentage, but mathematically, most of you right now that we're talking to aren't going to make it. And it was just,
you're like, it's almost impossible for 50+% of you guys to make it.
And that's what I said. I was like, it doesn't mean that you're any less of a person or anything like that. And maybe this time isn't your time.
Yeah.
But like, just to set expectations.
It kind of reminds me of the like in Pearl Harbor, the movie, when they're like, step forward. They have the guys like step forward, and they're like, because like, you're not going to make it. Who's willing to do this? And like, these guys step forward, but they're just like, it's kind of like that same concept where you're just like, they were talking about death in that aspect, but you guys are talking about literally just getting like reclassed, but it's like, look to your left and your right. That guy's not going to be standing there, and you're like, oh, that's kind of scary, because you're thinking, hopefully I'm the one still standing here, and there's literally no one to my left or right. But like, you don't want it to, like, it's almost like you don't want it to be the guy to your left that's like, oh, I'm no longer here because I washed out. And so, dang, it's kind of like a realization moment where you're like, oh, it's going to sink in. And then I'm sure it doesn't even fully sink in until it happens either, where you're like, oh, this was the end of my road, right? And you're like,
yeah. Well, I to be honest, dude, I don't know what that feels like, because I wasn't in that spot. But like, when you see friends that you bonded with, and you're like, oh man, I really thought that dude was going to make it. I guess not. I
feel like sometimes it's not even like a gradual thing. It's just a switch. Like, they're like, I'm going, I can. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope. Like, as soon as you hit that breaking point, it's like, I feel like it's tough, because like, you're literally trying to flex as much as you can. Like, oh, flex. And then as soon as it breaks, you're like, I feel like mentally it's hard to come back from that. Like,
for some people, yes. But as soon as that little planted seed of doubt is in there, it can grow really fast, or it can just grow after time. But once somebody gets that in there, it's like, ooh, boy, you can see them just tank.
Yeah. Oof, man. I don't know why that just gives me like chills, just like thinking about like all that work that you put in the moment you're just like the slightest bit of doubt. And then you're like, then you're not only trying to push through all this stuff that you're going through, you're trying to push through your own mental battle as well. And so I'm like, now you're like taking on two stressors at the same time. And I'm like, oh man, you have this internal and external battle that you're fighting. So this is going to go into our last question that we had from social media, and then I'm going to answer a question from the live stream after this. But this one was from me, and it's just, I already shared with you earlier what the biggest lesson that I learned when I joined the Air Force, and that was, you don't have to like the rules, but you get paid to follow them. That was the biggest lesson that I learned when I was in the Air Force. So what is the biggest lesson that you have learned in your 25 years that are in? Like, did you ever have a light bulb moment where you're like, that sentence or that experience completely changed the trajectory of my life? And it was one of the biggest learning lessons that you can remember.
Well, there's a lot, but I'll say
You have quite the career, so I'm sure you've
the
had
biggest one that I can
a
think of,
handful.
yeah, the biggest one I can think of right now would be understanding that you can't do this alone. Um, so one of the SOCOM or Special Operations has 5 soft truths, right? And one of them is, and they're all important. They all mean a lot to us. But one of them is, and I'm a butcher, so I can't say it verbatim, but Special Operations Forces cannot do this alone, or cannot conduct the mission without support. Being support personnel and outside SOCOM entities or outside Special Operations entities, and knowing that everybody from your security forces person to your contracting officer to your maintainers to your finance folks and on and on and on all contribute to the mission and enable us to do what we have to do. And it's a humbling experience, and you don't really see it when you're young because you're just like, no, I'm because of all that mental aspect, you're just trying to get after it and make it through and survive. And it takes a little bit, and seeing that is when you go, okay, now I get it. Everybody plays an extremely important role in making sure that the Air Force, the DoD at large, is successful in getting after the readiness and the mission that it needs to do.
I was actually had a conversation with somebody several months ago about kind of that same thing, how every single job is so valuable. And it's almost cliche where it's like, no, you're like, your job is valuable, right? Like everybody says that, like, you need to view your job as important. And it can be tough sometimes because you can look at other people's jobs and be like, oh, their job's way more important than mine. But the conversation I had with somebody, we were talking, and the job services came up, and they were like, man, it would be terrible to be services. And I was like, okay, you might not want to do it, but I was like, you realize that services is quite possibly one of the most important jobs in the Air Force? And they were like, how? And I was like, imagine if tomorrow, like every day, imagine if just like a certain career field just never showed up. And I was like, imagine if the DFAC was not like just permanently closed because services doesn't exist anymore. Like, how many single airmen that screws over?
Yep.
How many like airmen that are like there or have meal cards or like even the gym, like, and I'm like,
mortuary affairs.
And so I'm like, it's what's crazy as I was like, it's such a valuable job. Yeah, it might not be the most glorious job. When you think about how important services is a job, and I'm like, it's kind of crazy. The more I thought about it, the more I was like, services is like extremely valuable, like as a unit, like as a whole, right? Like every piece of the puzzle matters. Like, and it's easy for people to just write jobs off because they're not actually looking at, we have to do this together. Like everybody's contributing to the whole, right? And so it's like, if one thing is wrong, like you wouldn't want to drive a car with 3 wheels, and it's like, but one wheel, you're like, oh, well, big deal. It's just one wheel, like in general. But it's like, but if I took that wheel off your car, all of a sudden it's like a big deal, and it's like, so each piece may not be, as glorious as the other, but at the end of the day, like they all contribute to the car being able to drive down the road smoothly and safely.
Exactly.
And so it was a really interesting, because I'd never really thought deeply about that. And I was just like thinking about like random jobs, like in that conversation, like, oh, how can you actually think about certain jobs being important? And they had mentioned services. And then I just started like really thinking like, how valuable is that job? Right. And it's like, maybe it's not the most glorious, but it is extremely important.
And
like,
you can go that through every Air Force specialty code, every single one of them.
And so it's just cool, like a cool concept to see, because it is like kind of cliche to be like, no, your job is valuable, but it's like, really it is, but it's just trying to understand like the value in that. Because like right? The value that you provide is a lot different than the value that services provides.
Mhm.
It's like you guys have totally different concepts of a job.
Yeah, I can't do my job without them.
Yeah. And so it's just, I don't know, it's just a cool concept because like everybody has their own unique things and their own things that they're serving. Like you don't necessarily serve single airmen in the dorms, but services does. But like you also are going out and you've protected the country as a whole, which allows us to even operate in a free country, right?
Mhm.
Like so the reason services even has a job could be attributed to you guys. But then like the only reason we have a strong military is because services is providing for these single airmen. And so it's like and a lot of people want to think like they want to do it all, right? They want to be the one that saves America. And it's like you can't do that by yourself. Like you're just a piece of that puzzle to protect America.
That's
And
right.
so yeah, it's a really cool concept. So it does sound cliche, but even after getting out, I'm like, as I've like done job interviews with people, and the more I learn about different jobs, and I'm like, I didn't know you guys did this and did
Yeah.
that. And you're like, you start to appreciate stuff more because when you get in and you're new, a lot of times people they don't see the full scope of things. And so that's been a really unique experience and cool thing. That's why I like talking to people about their experience and their jobs because
Oh yeah.
it helps you have a more grounded like view of how things really are versus just like the shallow level of like, well, that job seems cooler, and you're like, oh yeah, it might, but it's also not for everybody. So
Exactly. It is definitely not for everybody. My
yeah,
job, I mean.
yeah. I mean, I think that goes with a lot of jobs in
Yeah.
general, like because even though you made CCT, like I'm sure there's some jobs in the Air Force that you'd probably be miserable in,
Yep.
and it's like,
I'm not
hey,
going to mention them though. I'm not going to mention them.
how could you be CCT, but then like, but you can't handle being in this job? And it's like, well, you could handle it, but like, you're not going to be happy or satisfied.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, everybody has their own mindsets on that. Um, so the question that we're going to have now, let me pull this one up, take this down. And it was, how often do you PCS in your career as CCT?
Well, it
There's a
kind
lot of
of,
variables in the military.
yeah, that's why I was like, oh boy. It's weird, right? Because there are some folks that have spent 12 years that do my job that have spent 12 years at the same spot, which is super rare. I mean, it's just like that never happens. Then there are some people that move every 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years. Um, I mentioned that I had 8 years in the UK, but that was because when the overseas at the time, they have changed it now, but at the time overseas, I could do what was a in place consecutive overseas tour, and I could just keep adding on and adding on. Um, it's tough. That is tougher to do in the States. Like they do try and move you every 3 to 4 years in the States. There are jobs that will get advertised where you can apply for them and try and get out of some place earlier. If you just don't happen to like the area or like, hey, I love the job that I'm doing right now, but that location with that different level of job is appealing. Let me apply for it. And then, could be an interview process, could just be, hey, you're the right rank and the right skill set and skill level. Like, let's get you on over there. So there's a lot of variables in that. I've PCS'd 7 times.
Okay, so that's
I'm probably missing. I'm probably missing some
every
in there.
what would that be? 3.5 years, every 4 years ish,
Yeah,
almost.
but I mean,
I think he's just shy of 4.
yeah, and I'm just thinking assignments, right? So I had
Yeah.
Florida, North Carolina, UK, Vegas, Florida, Washington, Vegas. Okay, so I had 8, if
Yeah.
just 8 different locations.
Dang.
So, yeah.
And then we have another question on here that we got. I'm going to pop this one up real quick. So it says, can you ask Chief Peaches? There are a lot of rumors going around that cross trainees are performing poorly at selection and SWICs. Do you think that they will stop allowing cross trainees to come back?
No, we will not. I can't speak to the rumors that cross trainees are performing poorly. I actually haven't heard that. There have been a few that we have had that, um, have taken their IFT to cross train and then kind of throttled back on their fitness a little bit. And then when they showed up, they couldn't pass, or showed up and, I don't know, got freaked out in their mind or something like that and decided to quit. Um, but we won't ever stop. We're critically manned, so we will always need folks to join. What we do though is we do typically cut it off at a certain rank. Though we typically don't allow tech sergeants and above to cross train, because you think about a 2 to 3 year pipeline for a tech sergeant, they're going to be putting on master sergeant more than likely, after graduating. And we expect our tech sergeant and master sergeants are experts. They are the ranks where they are the most qualified. They've gone to all the advanced schools. They've got numerous deployments, and they are running the team. And to be a cross trainee, to hop right into that, it's going to set you up for failure. So
it almost isn't beneficial to the Air Force, because they have so much experience at that point, so many years of experience in leadership, possibly, that it'd be best case scenario to have them utilize the skills that they've earned over that time, instead of starting back over at like filling the role of a junior enlisted. And it's like, you're kind of above that, at that point. Like you need to start doing something, like you said, you're a decision maker at that point, essentially. And so it's like, we need to utilize your mindset, right? Like,
and our tech sergeants and master sergeants are the ones that are kind of, once guys are on team, they are setting the training pace, the training schedule, and making sure that our new airmen and new NCOs that are operators are trained. And as a brand new tech or master, you just can't do that.
Dang. So I was thinking too, even with the cross training, like, because you guys already know that your washout rate, like the attrition rate, is high. So it's like, even though some like cross trainees might have a higher fail rate, as long as some of those cross trainees are passing every once in a while, I couldn't imagine why they would not allow people to keep doing it. Because a lot of times, don't they just wash people out if they try to cross train into special operations and they fail out of it? They go back to their career field.
Yep, anyways. That's right.
So like, they're already trained and specialized in it. They got a shot at this, and if they didn't make it, like, to me, it still seems like a good program for the Air Force, even when those people don't make it, because they're already still trained.
Yeah,
so
and
they just go back to their career
they're not
field,
losing.
so.
It's not like they're getting out of the Air Force. They are, hey, we have a critically manned career field that needs people. You're trained in maintenance. You're going to go there. If you get selected, great, you'll continue on a pipeline. If not, you're going to come right back to maintenance. And again, if you don't have any integrity issues and you don't promote yourself out of eligibility, you'll have a chance to retrain again.
Yeah, it sounds like it's actually better than having those types of people wash out than having a brand new person wash out, because they still have to go to tech school and be trained in a new career field anyways. So like the Air Force has to invest more money into that person than they do somebody that's cross training.
Yeah.
Because all they do is just go right back to their career field, where the Air Force doesn't spend any more money than what they did to just get them through the training process for cross training. So I would like it. To me, it seems like, even if the washout rate for cross trainees is still high, it seems like even if it's super high, it's still worth it for the Air Force to give those people a shot, because they can go back and then they still have a career that they're trained in.
Yeah. So I don't know what the attrition rate is specifically for cross trainees versus new airmen. I would say that most of the cross trainees that go do make it, or at least have a less chance of quitting, just because they are typically, they are older. It's not typically older. They are older. Whereas, a 17, 18-year-old coming in fresh, there's a lot of, hey, maybe it's their first time away from home, so they're dealing with homesickness, or they're missing their girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, so there's that aspect. Whereas, but saying that, like there are cross trainees that are married and have kids that are,
Mm-hmm.
getting their family's buy-in and saying, hey, I'm about to go try this out. And if I make it, I'm going to be gone a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think as long as the family's on board, and
you're good.
it's one of those where the family's on board. If you're doing what you love, like if your family's supportive and you're happy doing your job, like you can make it work. There are people that don't have jobs that travel a lot and their relationships still don't work, right? Like
Yeah.
at the travel aspect, because I knew a few guys when I was in Japan that were pararescue that had families with multiple kids, but they like it just depends on the support system that you have
Mm-hmm.
there, and if family's okay with that, because like everybody has different needs and wants, and so some people can deal with that distance or that time apart, and some people can't. But
Yep.
there's some people have issues even if there's no distance involved. So yeah, it's definitely like we kind of already mentioned this, you'd said this a few times, like there's so many variables, right? Like
Oh yeah.
there's no one size fits all to any aspect of an Air Force career in general. So that's one of the reasons why too, like I love putting information out, because the more information that we can get out there from different perspectives, the more of a whole picture it creates for people, because there isn't one cookie cutter answer. Because I could interview multiple people in combat control that have different experiences, or like we said,
Oh yeah.
have different lessons that they've learned, different things that they thought were the hardest. And so yeah, like you said, when everybody's like, hey, what's the hardest part, and you're like, oh, it's different
Well, I
for
mean, and then
everybody.
you can ask Aaron and Trent are the guys, the Aaron's the PJ and Trent's the special reconnaissance that I do the OnesReady podcast with. And we've all three of us will give you different answers every single time. And when we have guests on that do the same jobs that we do, they are also given different answers. It's just, everybody has different experiences. Aaron tried once as a young dude, didn't make it, went and he was aero medicine, I think is what he was, and ended up with a family and a kid, and then tried again, like, and he had to get family buy-in,
Yep.
it's just it's how it is sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome. This was the end of this video we're going to be doing today. I talked to you about doing a job interview, diving deeper into the specifics of combat control and possibly more about your training and everything, and a video specifically on that. And so that's something that people can look forward to in the future, is seeing Peaches again in another video. And then on the screen, you guys can see the links are in the description for OnesReady Podcast. So if you're interested in anything special operations, you guys have hundreds of episodes. Like,
Yeah, we've been doing
it's
it
kind
for
of
a
crazy.
while.
Like I started going back and I was like, holy smokes, like you guys have been on a roll with this for years. Like it's
Yep.
pretty impressive. So
Thank you.
a huge catalog of resources for anybody that's looking to go special operations. So I know
That's my battery. That's my light battery
shut off
dying.
on me earlier too. So yeah, if you're interested in special operations, Peaches and the rest of the crew on OnesReady is definitely going to be your one-stop shop for all special operations information. Because yeah, I skimmed through a few videos here or there, and I was like, dang, it's pretty impressive.
Thank
So
you.
you guys have been
Appreciate it.
doing a good service for a lot of people, because I know it was like when I joined 10 years ago, there was no information, and so I'm like, I can't imagine something like special operations is way more rigorous than just a normal job in the Air Force. So not having a lot of information was probably scary going into that, because you're like, I don't
Yeah.
even know what to expect. So
Yep.
being prepared is one of the best ways to to set yourself up for success. So yeah, you guys are doing a lot of good things over there. So if you
Thank you.
guys want to go check out them at OnesReady, and then we'll have them on a few other times doing some other videos and collaborations. And then we will see you guys around. So yeah, thanks for watching this live stream, and we'll see you guys another time.
Thanks for having me.